There is a sentence most people learn to say before they even understand what it means. I'm fine. Two simple words, soft, polite, easy. It slips off the tongue without effort. Someone asks how you are, and before your mind even checks in with your emotions, the answer is already out. I'm fine. It becomes automatic, almost like breathing. But if you pause for a moment and look beneath that sentence, you'll often find something else entirely: exhaustion, sadness, pressure, confusion, loneliness. So why do we say we're fine when we're clearly not? The truth is, I'm fine is rarely about honesty. It is about protection. From a young age, many of us are subtly taught that certain emotions are inconvenient. Crying too much makes you dramatic. Being angry makes you difficult. Feeling anxious makes you weak. Talking about your struggles makes you a burden. So slowly, without even realizing it, you start editing yourself. You begin filtering what is acceptable to show and what must stay hidden. I'm fine becomes a shield. It keeps conversations short. It keeps people from asking deeper questions. It keeps you safe from being exposed. There is a quiet fear behind that phrase, the fear of being seen too clearly. When you admit you're not okay, you open a door. That door leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability feels risky. What if they don't understand? What if they judge you? What if they minimize your pain? What if they walk away? So instead of risking rejection, you choose control. You control the narrative. You manage the image. You say you're fine. Another layer of this psychology is the need to appear strong. In a world that celebrates productivity, resilience, and constant progress, struggling feels like failure. You look around and see people posting their achievements, their smiles, their highlights. You rarely see their breakdowns, their doubts, their sleepless nights. So when you compare your internal chaos to their external perfection, you feel behind. You feel flawed. And instead of admitting that you're overwhelmed, you push harder. You convince yourself that strong people handle things quietly. Strong people don't complain. Strong people are fine. But constantly pretending comes at a cost. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not, you disconnect slightly from yourself. You ignore your own signals. Emotions are like internal messengers. They are not weaknesses, they are information. Sadness tells you something matters. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Anxiety tells you something feels uncertain or unsafe. When you silence these signals repeatedly, you don't make them disappear, you just bury them. And buried emotions do not dissolve. They accumulate. Over time, this accumulation turns into emotional numbness. You might start feeling detached from your own experiences. You laugh when you're supposed to laugh. You respond the way people expect you to respond. But inside, there's a dullness, a quiet emptiness. You're functioning, but you're not fully present. And the scariest part is that you may not even notice how disconnected you've become. There is also the fear of being a burden. Many people who constantly say, I'm fine, are deeply empathetic. They don't want to add stress to someone else's life. They know everyone is fighting their own battles. So instead of sharing their struggles, they absorb them silently. They become the strong one, the listener, the supporter, the dependable friend. But who listens to the listener? Who checks on the strong one? Sometimes the habit of saying, I'm fine, is rooted in childhood experiences. If you grew up in an environment where your feelings were dismissed or ignored, you learned quickly that expressing them changed nothing. Maybe when you cried, you were told to stop being dramatic. Maybe when you were scared, you were told to toughen up. Maybe when you tried to explain your pain, no one truly listened. So your brain adapted. It decided it was safer to shut down than to keep reaching out and being unheard. That adaptation may have helped you survive then, but it can limit you now. There's also control in saying, I'm fine. When you admit you're struggling, you enter uncertain territory. You don't know how the other person will respond. But when you say you're fine, you stay in control of the interaction. You decide how much is revealed. You avoid awkward silences. You avoid advice you didn't ask for. You avoid the discomfort of crying in front of someone. In a strange way, pretending feels stable. But stability built on suppression is fragile. You may start noticing small cracks, irritability over minor things, sudden exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, overthinking late at night, a constant feeling that something is off even if you can't name it. These are not random. They are signs that your inner world is asking for attention. The more you ignore it, the louder it becomes, sometimes in the form of burnout, sometimes anxiety, sometimes emotional breakdowns that seem to come out of nowhere. The hidden psychology behind "I'm fine" is not about weakness. It is about survival patterns. It is about coping strategies that once protected you. But survival is not the same as living. You were not meant to constantly carry everything alone. You were not meant to perform strength while feeling fragile inside. Imagine what would happen if just once you paused before answering. If someone asked how you are and you took a breath, if you checked in with yourself honestly, maybe you wouldn't pour out everything. Maybe you'd simply say, "It's been a tough week," or "I'm a little overwhelmed." Small truths, gentle honesty. That is where healing begins, not with dramatic confessions, but with tiny cracks in the armor. When you allow yourself to acknowledge your real feelings, even privately, you rebuild connection with yourself. You stop gaslighting your own experience. You stop minimizing your own pain. And that self-validation is powerful, because the first person who needs to believe your feelings matter is you. Saying "I'm fine" is easy, but being honest with yourself requires courage. It requires unlearning years of conditioning. It requires accepting that being human means being imperfect, emotional, and sometimes not okay. And that is not a flaw. That is authenticity. If you look closely, the phrase "I'm fine" often appears most when you are anything but fine. It shows up during heartbreak, during burnout, during quiet disappointments that no one else notices. It becomes a reflex in moments where you actually need connection the most. And this is where the deeper psychology reveals something important: avoidance. Avoidance feels relieving in the short term. When you avoid talking about your pain, you don't have to relive it. When you avoid acknowledging your stress, you can continue functioning. When you avoid difficult conversations, you postpone conflict. But avoidance does not erase reality. It delays it, and delayed emotions often grow heavier. You might tell yourself you're fine because you don't fully understand what you're feeling. Not all emotional pain is loud. Some of it is subtle, a slow drifting away from joy, a constant tension in your chest, a quiet sense of dissatisfaction. When emotions are unclear, it's easier to label them as nothing. So you say you're fine because you don't have the vocabulary for what's actually happening inside you. There is also identity attached to this phrase. If you've always been the reliable one, the mature one, the calm one, admitting you're struggling can feel like betraying your own image. People depend on you. They expect stability, so you maintain it, even if it costs you your peace. But here is something important. Strength is not the absence of struggle. Real strength is the willingness to face it. Emotional maturity is not about suppressing feelings. It is about understanding them. When you constantly deny your inner state, you freeze your emotional growth. You stay stuck in patterns that no longer serve you. Over time, always saying "I'm fine" can create distance in relationships. Not because people don't care, but because they don't know there's anything to care about. If you consistently present yourself as okay, others will assume you are. And then you may start feeling unseen or unsupported, even though you never allowed anyone to truly see you in the first place. It becomes a painful cycle. Breaking this cycle does not mean oversharing with everyone. It means choosing safe spaces. It means identifying one person you trust and practicing small honesty. It means journaling your real feelings instead of pushing them away. It means asking yourself at the end of the day, how did I actually feel today? These small acts rebuild emotional awareness. Another powerful shift is redefining what it means to be fine. Instead of using it as a mask, you can use it as a check-in. Fine doesn't have to mean perfect. It can mean surviving. It can mean trying. It can mean doing your best under pressure. When you remove the expectation of constant positivity, you give yourself permission to be human. There will always be moments where you choose privacy. That's healthy. Not every feeling needs to be public. But there is a difference between privacy and suppression. Privacy is intentional. Suppression is fear-driven. When you notice you're saying, "I'm fine," out of fear, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of looking weak, that's your signal to pause. You deserve relationships where honesty is safe. You deserve spaces where your struggles are not minimized. You deserve to feel supported, not just needed. And most importantly, you deserve to acknowledge your own emotions without shame. The hidden psychology of always saying, "I'm fine," reveals a deeper longing, the longing to be understood without having to explain everything, the longing to be accepted without performing strength, the longing to feel safe enough to say, "I'm not okay," and know the world won't collapse. Healing begins with awareness. The next time those words rise, automatically pause. Ask yourself what you're protecting. Ask yourself what you're afraid might happen if you told the truth, and gently challenge that fear. You don't have to tear down the walls all at once. Just open a window. Because you were never meant to carry your inner world alone. You were never meant to compress your emotions into two convenient words. And you were never meant to believe that being human makes you weak. Maybe you're not fine. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're healing. Whatever the truth is, it deserves space. And the moment you allow yourself to admit it, even quietly, is the moment you begin reclaiming your emotional freedom.